Hey all, Heretic here, and today in the Battlegrounds we're going to be talking about spell locks. We're going to talk about how we're going to buff up our spells and have a lot of them trigger throughout the game. So much in fact that we're probably going to overwhelm our opponent and, well, drive them completely nuts. How do we get these big boards? What minions do we need? What heroes and just all the good quest rewards are we looking for? Let's jump into all of it right now. Special thanks to Sevel for the footage we were using for this one. So anytime you see any footage in this, it is going to be from one of Sevel's videos, where I will link in the description below to his channel. He does Twitch, does YouTube, phenomenal high-end player, definitely someone who you want to check out his stuff and see what kind of crazy builds he's putting together today. Thank you very much, Sevel. So to begin with this build, we need to think about the main minions we're going to be looking for. Now, of course, it's early in the season. I expect lots of things to be changing. Minions going up in tier, down in tier, spells being buffed and nerfed. So some things will change. If they do change, more than likely, you will find in the description below after that change that I will put a comment just letting you know how it might affect gameplay and how viable this build might be. Because if suddenly something goes from, say, tier 4 to tier 6, that's harder to do. Or if it goes from tier 4 to remove from game, harder to do. So definitely, if you're watching a video and something feels a little off, look at the comments real quick, because it might say, oh yeah, this build's still viable, but this minion's over here now, so you need to do this, or this spell is now over here. Just keep an eye out for those if they change. Now, this build is pretty simple, in so much that you are looking to get a lot of spells and continuously trigger them. You really don't find yourself in this build until around tier 5, because a lot of the good Murloc stuff starts around 4 and 5 and into 6. First thing you're going to be looking for that says you might be playing this build, really kind of the linchpin of it, is going to be Flotsam Flinger. Now this thing is very simple. It's going to be tier 4. It's going to sit there, and at the end of your turn, any tier 3 or lower battle cry, it is going to trigger. And if you think about that, that's kind of nutty, because there are a lot of different Murlocs from tier 3 and lower in the initial part of the game you'll have on your board that will then scale up your board while you look for these harder to find pieces at tier 5 and 6. That way you can actually get the win. They're going to give you the tempo to carry you into the rest of this build. So Flotsam Flinger, probably the first thing you're going to be finding on your way to this build if you happen to find yourself doing it. Now, if you have a bunch of random battle cries on your board, the next thing you're going to be looking for is you got a Bran. Why? Because you're triggering battle cries. And Bran doubles those battle cries. So definitely Bran is an amazing fit for this board. You want that. Now, it can be hard to pull off to have two neutrals on the board, but that being said, if at the end of your turn you're triggering all your battle cries, maybe a Drakari Enchanter's a good fit too. The reason for that being is it's an end of turn trigger. The issue is now you've got a Bran and a Drakari, which typically aren't getting all the Murloc buffs, at least at this point. So it could be a gamble to take, but it also depends what other minions you're finding. Another minion you really want for this build is the Magic Fin Mycologist. This one you might even find before the Flotsam Flinger, and you might be like, but Heretic, this is a tier 5 minion. I don't care about this with the Flotsam, and I understand that, but it's what this minion does that's important, and that's once per turn after you buy a Tavern spell, get a 1/1 Murloc and teach it that spell. Now that is the important part right there. You're teaching it a spell, and it's a tier 1 Murloc that cannot be tripled, so I don't care how many are on your board, you're never getting a gold copy of this. I'm sorry. Now, the important thing is, what spell do you teach it? Obviously, there's lots of spells to generate extra Murlocs. All of these are great in a pinch if that's what you find. But you're really looking at this point for tempo, because if you've got a Drakari and a Bran, you need stats on your board. So you're looking for time management, you're looking for Shiny Ring. Those are probably the most important for that initial tempo. Now, if you're really strong and you're feeling super greedy, maybe it's Strike Oil. Sit there, throw it out, and start giving yourself a permanent increase to your gold, because you're going to get the spell, you're going to play it, you're going to get a Magic Fin. So you've already got one trigger from the first one you get. You're going to play the Magic Fin. If you've got that Bran, there's 2 more triggers. If you leave this on your board, 2 more triggers. It gets out of control really fast. But if you just go straight gold and you've got no tempo at all, you're also going to die. It feels really good to have 50 gold a turn, but not if it's for the next game. You need the gold immediately, because once you're at 0 health, all the money in the world isn't going to help you. Now, those are the main minions to this build, I would say. And now we're going to talk about the optional things you could fit on this board that can be helpful and you definitely want to consider. First, we're going to look at something like Sholfin Mystic. Well, it might touch your board. It's probably not going to stay on your board, but that permanent buff to your spells is going to be a big deal. If you're constantly triggering tempo and it's only, say, a 1/1 buff from Shiny Ring, but all of a sudden you've played 3 or 4 Mystic Sholfins, that's a different level of buffing. Now it's getting better and better and better. Maybe you got a Tranquil Meditative on your board, and that's just sitting there slowly buffing the health of those spells over and over again. Once again, this doesn't actually have to stay on your board. You can just play it, cast it, cycle it through. It's going to give that permanent buff, and that's what's important. Felfire Conjurer, another amazing way to juice your spells. Have this thing sit on your board, have it pump up your spells. If you're running a Drakari like we've already discussed, now because it's an end of turn buff to spells, you're going to increase that further. So it's very important. Something to remember is positioning too. End of turn triggers happen left to right. So if you're buffing your spells, put that Felfire to the left more. That way you can buff your spells before you put a bunch of stats on your board. It's a little thing, but little things add up as the game goes on. If you don't do this for 1 or 2 turns, not a big deal. But what if you missed it for 4 turns? And that whole time you had a Drakari? Now we're talking about a significant loss of stats that very easily can lose you the game. So positioning, super important with this build. Make sure that Felfire is in the right spot if you're triggering a lot of end of turn stats. And I would say finally, one of the last optional minions to throw on this board is going to be Bile Spitter. Just the fact that it already has Venom, once it attacks, it's going to give another one of your Murlocs Venom, is a big deal. That is an easy way to take out something that might have outstatted you dramatically just by poking it, and all of a sudden it's dead, and now something else on your board has Venom. So definitely, towards the end of the game, when you're starting to look at your brand, maybe it's time for your Drakari to go, put that Bile Splitter down to take out that ridiculous elemental in his thousands. Because it doesn't matter how many stats he has, if you can do 1 point of damage to him with Venom. And basically any hero can work with this build, so I don't know if I'd worry about the heroes too much. I mean, off the top of my head, obviously Flurgle's good because it's Murlocs. You want to cycle a lot of Murlocs. You could run a George, just throw Divine Shield on all your minions. Remember, he has really high armor, so that super makes it viable. On the flip side, Shudderwalk, well, he can trigger these battle cries more, has so little armor you might die before you ever get to this build off in a Shudderwalk. So, you know, pick your poison. It depends what's offered to you. I typically prefer high heroes, and with this build, I feel like it doesn't matter quite as much. But then again, some heroes are so good at making things better, it's worth the effort. And here, of course, let's just throw up a couple board examples for you to show what a spell lock board might look like and what kind of positioning you might go for. Now, obviously, the deeper in the game goes, the more it's going to change. But otherwise, this is the kind of thing you're going to be dealing with in the mid-game and towards the later part of the game. Now, when it comes to rewards, things that might synergize with this build to make it do a little better for you would be something like Snicker Snack. You just sit there and all of a sudden your battle cries trigger extra. If you're already running a brand, if you've already got a Drakari, guess what? They're triggering extra times. They're triggering to double. It's just, it gets kind of nutty. On top of everything you already can be running, Snicker Snack can work well. Magic Fin Relic, of course, can work because this one is dumb. At the start of each turn, you get a 1/1 Murloc that discover a spell and teach it. And you don't have to keep it on the board. You can, obviously, with this build, but just pop it on the board, let it do its thing. It's one of the more ridiculous quest rewards, and if they don't rein it in, you are gonna go completely nuts with this build putting this in there. And finally, Perpetual Incantation. If this is doable remotely, this is an infinitely stacking quest reward that gives you a +1/+1 buff to your spells. Well, if it's easy, if it's something like Avenge 4 or 5, even if it's just every turn you're getting a 1/1 or a 2/2 buff total, that adds up. On top of everything else we're doing, you really can get those buffs quite high and make your Murlocs ridiculously big. Do you want them in the thousands? This is one of the ways you do that. Have your board of 1,000 statted Murlocs and have fun, make your opponent cry, and dominate the lobby. All right, that's it. That's Spell Murlocs. What do you think? Do you like this build? Does it seem silly to you? Does it feel too complicated? This is definitely one of those builds I feel that requires you to find a lot of technical pieces at the right time, and you have to put them together perfectly. But if you do, this thing is an absolute monster. Now, I always try to make these guys so they're dedicated towards players who don't get to play as much, maybe don't have hours to peruse every single video, who can't dig into every Reddit post and go, oh my God, that's the best build. Why are you noobs not using it? You've got a job, you got kids, you got school, you got shit to do. And you just need someone to break it down for you and explain it in a way where it seems doable and you know all the pieces and parts and you can make it happen. That's what we want to do here. If you like these, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff, because that's how the channel grows. I'll keep making this stuff and you can keep learning all the tricks on how to win your lobbies. Thanks for watching all. I hope you had a good time. I hope to see you in the Battlegrounds. Till then, later.